Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Carl Burleson.
Put your pinky rings up to the moon. Girls, what y'all trying to do? 24-karat magic.
Okay, I kind of feel like I now know what Stevie Wonder felt like when he walked out here. This is quite a stage. It's great to be here. Good to have an opportunity to talk with you all, to talk about UAS integration and the opportunities the FAA is trying to shape for this industry. But before I get into my more formal talk, I want to give a thanks and I want to give a recognition. So it's really hard to see from up here, but I know I want to give some recognition to Michael Huerta. I know you're somewhere in the audience. Michael, can you stand up for a second? Oh, there you are. I see him waving back there. So Michael is the former FAA administrator, and I've got to say that because of his leadership and his vision, he really laid a lot of the foundation of what we're building on today. So again, if you have an opportunity, please go up and say thank you, because again, he really was vital in shaping, I think, the future of this industry. And I also want to give a thanks because I think if we're going to work safely in integrating UAS into the National Airspace System, the FAA can't do it alone. We require the real work together with industry. And I think one of the risks today, if I can say it, is an uninformed recreational flyer in the wrong place at the wrong time could impact everybody, both the recreational side and the commercial. And that's why I am very pleased to announce the FAA has strengthened our relationship with Know Before You Fly educational campaign founded by AUVSI and the Academy of Model Aeronautics. This agreement, which we signed last week, enhances our partnership, demonstrates the FAA and the industry's commitment to safety, and I think sets the stage for increased collaboration and outreach to the current and prospective users. I really think it's a very positive development. So let me turn back now to this key question I'm sure many of you are asking, and certainly we at the FAA are asking, as well as regulators around the world, of how do you introduce this new set of users into the safest form of transportation on the planet? How do you do it wisely? How do you do it safely and in a reasonable time frame? So in thinking about the challenges, I'm reminded of a conversation I had with my sons on a stormy evening long ago in DC. So if you've heard me give some talks, you've probably heard this story before. But it was a pretty sticky night in August. And for those who've been in DC, you understand what I'm talking about, where the humidity is probably higher than the temperature. And a raging thunderstorm had knocked out the power in our house. So I took the boys out to our screened-in porch to watch the rain and the wind and really the light show. And so my older son is kind of adventuresome, and he said, "Well, Dad, can I go out and play in this?" And I said, "No, JB, just stay here and watch it." My younger son was sitting on my lap, and he was very quiet, not saying anything for the longest time. So I finally said, "Will, what do you think about this storm?" He looked up at me and said, "Dad, is this any way for a 7-year-old to die?" So what was fascinating to me was you have two boys, same genetic stock, same parents, yet having two completely different views of the same phenomena we were observing. And I think these divergent views of the world is not a bad analogy for the challenges we face with the rapid development of this new industry in UAS. Some see this incredible opportunity for new markets and services, and boy, it needs to go faster. Others fear this might undermine safety and add new levels of risk into the safest system in the world. And as a regulator, the FAA's job is to find a way forward, to find the path that manages expectations on both sides of this equation. And let's face it, there are some really big challenges, as the UAS are a little different than the manned aircraft we've dealt with historically. And this is not just true in terms of use, but frankly in terms of the pace of innovation and the volume of operations. For example, the progression of UAS innovation and the change in product cycles can generally be measured in months, not years. Similarly, the volume of UAS operations is outpacing manned aircraft. This is a disruptive technology, but I'm probably not having to tell this crowd that. To date, FAA has registered more than 1.4 million drones, nearly 400,000 of which are used for commercial operations, and we've issued more than 130,000 remote pilot licenses. A good many of these drones are small systems that you can fly with your finger and a smartphone. Game-changing autonomy is going to find its way into air mobility vehicles. Think about it. In the space of a few years, there are nearly 4 times as many UAS as registered manned aircraft in the United States. So let me touch briefly on how we're trying to chart a course forward to integrate this new industry by sharing a few thoughts on how we need to gather data, what we're doing to create the framework, and then how we're building the infrastructure. So first on the data. I was talking with several UAS firms last week in California, and one person asked me, so what was the top thing FAA really needs to facilitate integration? And my response was pretty simple: data, data, data. Our risk management approach and how we set regulations and policy and promote, and most importantly, safety, and how we've gotten to the levels of safety in the traditional aviation industry is all about having access to safety data to properly understand and manage risk. And that's why the UAS Integration Pilot Program, or IPP, launched back in October of 2017 was so important. This is allowing us to work with a variety of users and government organizations to safely test and validate advanced operations of drones. Through the IPP, with 9 state, local, and tribal governments across the US, they are helping us to develop UAS regulations, policy, and guidance through practical applications and gathering data. Perhaps more importantly, they have actually become a match that is lighting off some of the creative fire in this industry and in the public for what novel new forms of transportation might achieve. We really see this as a win-win. The demonstrations and more recently, routine operations are proving big time how small drones can be beneficial. In the process, the FAA is honing its risk assessment skills. That will help us create sensible regulations that will ensure drones, other aviation users, and humans can safely coexist. In fact, the IPP is already paying dividends on this investment. Recently, the FAA granted the first air carrier certification to a commercial drone operator for package deliveries in Blacksburg, Virginia. Although the regulatory framework for broader drone operations is not complete, the IPP has helped to inform the FAA and drone operators to the extent which operations can begin under existing rules. So that leads me next to what is the regulatory framework we need to put in place. And that is, we need to gradually expand when and how those operations conduct business. And the FAA is focused on enabling this ever-expanding universe of UAS operations. But in order to allow such operations to be conducted safely and securely, we are moving forward in a number of regulatory initiatives. So in February of this year, the FAA published an interim final rule on external markings requirements for small UAS. The rule requires small unmanned aircraft owners to display their unique identifiers, registration number, on an external surface of the aircraft. We've just closed public comment period for proposed new rules that would allow small UAS to operate over people and at night. We received 1,000 comments. Thank you very much. We are working hard to respond to all the input we received to be able to propose a final rule. We also just closed out an advance notice of proposed rulemaking, a process where we try to get some input before we even start proposing a draft rule on a topic we call safe and secure operations of small UAS. This is where the FAA security partners have helped us to highlight some of the important security and public safety operation questions. It delves into operational and airspace restrictions for small drones, explores hardware requirements, and proposes identification and tracking technologies. For that one, we received nearly 2,000 comments. Again, thank you, which we're mulling through right now and deciding how best to move forward. So finally, let me touch on remote identification. I know this is of keen interest here, as last night a number of folks approached me to talk about this issue. Let me assure you, everyone, that we understand remote identification is fundamental to both the safety and security of drone operations. Remote ID will be necessary for routine beyond visual line of sight operations, operations over people, package delivery, operations in congested areas, and for continued safe operation of all aircraft and shared airspace. It will also be foundational for the advancement of automated passenger or cargo carrying air transportation, which is often talked about as urban air mobility. From a security perspective, remote ID will enable us to connect a drone to its control station location. With the universal remote ID, the FAA and our security partners will be better able to locate a drone operator and determine if a drone is being operated in a clueless, careless, or criminal manner and take appropriate action if necessary. The FAA is committed to establishing remote identification requirements as quickly as possible and is working hard to get a notice of proposed rule out. So let me then turn to infrastructure, because again, we need this third piece to really make sure this industry has an opportunity to grow. Given the expected volumes of drone operations, drone traffic management must be automated. Our first step toward that goal was automating the process of obtaining approvals to fly Part 107 small drones in controlled airspace. In late 2017, we teamed with the industry to launch LANCE, Low Altitude Authorization and Notification, which automated and greatly increased the approval time. Today's operators who want to fly in a controlled airspace near airports submit their flight requests through an approved FAA UAS service provider. Those service providers have access to FAA airspace data, including no-fly zones and gridded maps that show the maximum altitude above ground that drones can fly. This helps make sure the requested operation will be safe. If approved, operators receive their authorizations in near real time. Since program launch, we have received about 90,000 authorization requests, almost 90% of which were automatically approved. The others required a little more coordination. LANCE is now live at 300 air traffic facilities covering about 500 airports in the United States. And I'm here today to announce that due to ongoing success, we will now be making the capability available at 109 FAA contract control towers by the end of May. This will again widen the geographic footprint and the availability for this service. LANCE is an important step, but again, just the first step in implementation of UAS traffic management, or UTM. Overall, UTM is essentially a set of concepts and tools being developed between NASA, FAA, and industry to safely separate and facilitate dense, low-altitude drone operations. UTM is not a specific equipment system. It will be complementary to existing air traffic management systems and will not replace it. We're working closely with NASA, who is doing some heavy lifting for us right now in this area with UAM Technical Capability Level, or TCL, demonstrations. The lessons we learn from the 4 increasingly complex TCL demonstrations will again help FAA develop the needed, highly automated air traffic management system and our understanding it to make sure it can safely serve both manned and unmanned aircraft. NASA's last and final TCL is happening soon. It's going to focus on small drone operations in higher density urban areas, including news gathering and package delivery options. So in moving forward, I think it's important to acknowledge the truth, as certainly many of you all know, that small drones are already changing the landscape of our economy and society. At a UAS test site in Maryland, doctors from the University of Maryland School of Medicine and engineers from the University of Maryland recently used the drone to deliver an organ to a hospital in Baltimore in the middle of the night for a successful kidney transplant. The Angel flight followed more than 2 years of research, development, and testing, which included a custom-built 8-rotor UAS with multiple powertrains, and this, in their words, a high-tech apparatus for maintaining and monitoring a viable human organ, end quote. And I think the interesting thing about this approval is it all happened with local FAA involvement, not national. Again, the knowledge is getting out there, and the ability to allow these kinds of operations is moving forward. In San Diego, the Chula Vista Police Department and CAPE, a private UAS teleoperator company, are using drones as first responders on a daily basis to protect the public, potentially save lives of first responders, as well as to make the department more efficient. The operation is part of the city San Diego's IPP. I saw a demonstration of this last year, and I will just say personally, it hits home for me, because one of my sons is a police officer. I will let you guess which of the sons from my story became the police officer. But this is how it works. From its headquarters roof, the department sends drones to check out calls that occur within approximately 1 mile of the station. A trained first response teleoperator at the station views the live high-definition video from the drone and advises officers in the vicinity about the circumstances. The live feed is also available on the officer's cell phone. Here's the department's description. Imagine the value of knowing that the truck leaving the scene of a robbery is red and heading northbound, or the report of a man with a gun is actually a kid with a BB gun, or the accident on the freeway involving a tanker has placards saying chemical hazard. Since October, they have launched drone first responders on more than 400 calls in which 59 arrests were made, and for half of those calls, the drone was first on the scene, with an average on-scene response time of 100 seconds. Equally important is that 60 times that having the drone there first alleviated the need to send the officers at all. When I hear stories like this, they remind me of how important it is for FAA to do its job and work with you and other stakeholders to find ways of integrating operations into the national airspace as fast, as safely, and securely possible. That's why we're here at XPONENTIAL. So let me conclude with 3 thoughts. First, we at the FAA recognize that we've hit the age of innovation in a way that is reshaping the nation's airspace. It's not just UAS. When we look at what's going on, we have commercial space, we have potentially the return of supersonic flight. It's really amazing to see the pace of technological change. And I will tell you, the FAA is excited about it. Whether I talk to some of our young engineers or some of our senior management, there is a real excitement of how these new users will push us to figure out how do we meet the challenges of safe integration and allow the full blossoming of these potentials. Second, we want to figure out how to take full advantage of a performance-based approach and industry standards to achieve the safety we all need. We jettisoned decades of prescriptive rules in how we certified general aviation aircraft several years ago to focus on a performance-based approach. This has allowed greater innovation in that sector. In fact, I suspect if you walk the exhibit hall, you'll see a lot of that innovation in the hardware that's there. I will also note that most of you probably don't know that the fuel that is used in the aircraft that fly you across this country every day actually isn't certified by the FAA. You would think that's pretty important from a safety standpoint. Our rules actually refer to an ASTM industry standard of what that fuel must meet in terms of properties. That process has worked tremendously well for decades. So it's that kind of approach we want to be able to take advantage fully as we find ways of integrating UAS into the national airspace. And finally, last week, when I participated in a NASA workshop on automation and autonomy, someone asked me, what was the timeline for FAA certifying these type of new vehicles and operations? And I said the answer is simple. Our timeline is safety. Having the data, having the understanding to be able to manage the risk in the system. And I'd suggest that both as the regulator and the industry, we need to embrace safety as our timeline together. And this is the way we are going to be able to integrate UAS into the national airspace system. Thanks very much for the opportunity to give some remarks. Have a great XPONENTIAL, and I'll be here the rest of the day, and I look forward to being able to meet you and certainly try to answer your questions. Thank you very much.